Last month Moon Jae-in, erstwhile puppet of American imperialists, stood in the Mayday Stadium in Pyongyang, North Korea's capital, and promised a new era of shared prosperity as 150,000 North Koreans cheered. The next day, he and Kim Jong Un, North Korea's dictator, were driven to the top of Mount Paektu, the Korean peninsula's sacred peak, where they put together the tips of their thumbs and index fingers to form a heart shape in a gesture more commonly used by K-pop stars to show appreciation for their fans. This week South and North Korean soldiers began clearing mines along their heavily fortified border. As The Economist went to press, America's Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, was about to fly to Pyongyang to arrange a second summit meeting between President Donald Trump and Mr. Kim, to follow the television spectacular starring the two leaders in Singapore in June. Meanwhile, Mr. Kim's fourth get-together with Mr. Moon is planned for later this year in Seoul, the South Korean capital. Get our daily newsletter, upgrade your inbox and get our daily dispatch and editor's picks. It is also unprecedented that it is surreal. A year ago Mr. Kim was firing missiles and conducting an underground nuclear test, his country's sixth. Mr. Trump promised fire and fury against Little Rocket Man. Now he jokes that he fell in love with Mr. Kim in Singapore and says that 1 year on is a much different time. This week in Seoul, Banyan pinched himself when he saw a huge photograph of the gathering on Mount Paektu hanging across the facade of City Hall, a beaming Mr. Moon holding Mr. Kim's hand high. Remember, Mr. Kim executed his uncle, assassinated his half-brother and keeps hundreds of thousands of his citizens in gulags. Praising the North Korean state or even reading its propaganda remains a crime in the South. Yet the odds of a dramatic peace declaration are rising. Mr. Trump seems to see such a step as a means to a Nobel Peace Prize. Mr. Moon has spent much of his political career pursuing a peace deal with the North. And Mr. Kim could present one to his citizens as an American climb-down. This is alarming to hawks on North Korea. No security guarantees will be enough for Mr. Kim to give up his nukes, they say. Instead, the North will try to shake down the outside world for concessions, as it has done countless times. Mr. Kim, they point out, is already dragging his feet over the commitment he made in Singapore to disarm, having failed to provide any inventory of his nuclear capabilities. That fits the pattern of alternating bonhomie and recalcitrance established by his father. Yet Mr. Kim's summit diplomacy this year, including 3 meetings with President Xi Jinping of China, has reshaped the political dynamics of Northeast Asia. No one, certainly not the skeptics, predicted the sudden change of tone. So it is worth considering whether they might be wrong about Mr. Kim's ultimate intentions, too. Could the dictator really be thinking of giving up nukes in favor of economic development? They cost a fortune. He might be able to trade them for an American commitment to withdraw its forces from the South. After all, Mr. Trump hates keeping troops there. Meanwhile, Mr. Moon's dream of a Korean confederation, with no bad word said about the gulags, would suit Mr. Kim very well. It is only a step from there to a neutral Korean peninsula, an old idea strategists are reviving. China fears North Korea falling into the American orbit. America would hate South Korea to fall into the Chinese one. Meanwhile, paranoid Koreans will always be suspicious of Japan's designs on the peninsula. Suddenly the Koreas as the Switzerland of the East becomes a tempting notion. It may also be a forlorn one. How could neutrality be guaranteed in an era of growing rivalry between America and China? There is another scenario. For all that Mr. Kim's diplomatic dance increases his security in the short run, it could well undermine it in the end. Flirting with many partners at once can only get harder. The endless foreign summits, meanwhile, will give ordinary North Koreans a better sense of the vastly greater well-being of people in the South, and of their own country's brutal contradictions. Mr. Kim may be looking strong and shrewd now, but great peril may lie in store. Which of these scenarios seems the likeliest? In raising nuclear tensions last year and in embracing his summitry in 2018, Mr. Kim has proved himself a gambler. But is he overplaying his hand? Outsiders have consistently underestimated the Kims, risk-takers all. But bear in mind that no one has ever lost money betting that they will sell the same big bag of nothing again and again.